Hi there, this is Nick Loman from the University of Birmingham. Happy to be here virtually talking about benchtop sequences for your workshop. Sounds very interesting. It's kind of a bit strange this. I'm giving this talk in my office to myself, so it's a bit of an odd experience I haven't tried before. I hope it works for you guys. Okay, so I'm going to talk just for less than 15 minutes about benchtop sequences. Benchtop sequences have been around for a while now, the first being the 454 Junior, released almost 3 years ago. And benchtop sequences are obviously interesting because they are relatively inexpensive compared to the larger instruments like the Illumina HiSeq, and they fulfill a slightly different role in that they're able to sequence smaller amounts of sequencing data but much quicker than those larger format instruments, and they have a much reduced price tag, anywhere between $80,000 for the Ion Torrent PGM up to about $215,000 for the Proton, which includes a fairly meaty analysis server. The Proton is, we're not going to talk about it in a lot of detail because it's only just been released and we haven't seen any data from it, but it's worth noting that that's now available. So this rather busy slide is from a recent review in Nature Reviews Microbiology that we carried out of benchtop sequences and other sequences for use in public health microbiology. And a lot of the content I'm going to cover is in that review, so I encourage you to check it out. Just going over this very briefly, the process of doing DNA sequencing with next generation sequencing instruments is fairly uniform across the different platforms. If you start with genomic DNA, which should be reasonably high quality, and you have to do some quantitation on it, you then go through a process of fragmenting, tagging with adapters and barcodes, amplification, and then sequencing. I'm just going to highlight a few of the differences to that protocol. One thing that's notable is with the Illumina platform, they have the availability of the next era kits, which permits a process called tagmentation, which both works out the fragmentation and the tagging in a single step. And one of the advantages of that method is that you can use reasonably small amounts of starting DNA, a matter of nanograms. It's notable that the 454 and the Ion instruments both rely on emulsion PCR and enrichment for their amplification stage. The Illumina platform has quite a different approach with their so-called solid phase bridge amplification method, which follows a PCR step. The PacBio is most notable for the fact that it can do this in a single molecule mode without amplification. So, but we're not going to talk about that in a lot of detail. It's just worth mentioning there are lots of different ways of doing fragmentation other than tagmentation. You can use various physical methods, but you can also use enzymatic approaches such as fragmentase or ion express libraries. Cost is obviously a majorly important area. The Ion Torrent PGM is notable because it permits you to have multiple chip types, and those chip types have a different price point from the 314, which is about $99, up to the 318. These prices on the slide include the cost of doing a single library preparation. And so what you can see is that Ion Torrent is generally the cheapest to run, the MySeq is the next most expensive, and the 454 Junior is the most expensive. If you factor that on a cost per megabase, you can see that the 314, the 316 and the 454 Junior are relatively expensive compared to using either the PGM with the 318 chip or the MySeq. And I've just outlined those two because critically the cost per megabase is well under $1 per megabase, which really brings this in line for doing typing and public health microbiology on bacterial strains. Well under $100 per sample. So we spent some time trying to compare the benchtop high throughput sequencing platforms around the time of the E. coli outbreak of 0104H4 S-Tech in Germany, and this was a remarkable outbreak for many reasons, and you've probably heard a lot about it already, so I'm not going to labour the point, but this was really an example of prospective genomic analysis of multiple strains from the outbreak. A hugely exciting time, and also a great advert for what you can do with benchtop sequences. BGI, in fact, released sequence data first from this outbreak on their FTP site from the PGM, and that was followed up with 454 data sequenced by the HPA and released on their website, and MySeq data generated by Illumina. So this was a great example of how you can release sequence data into the public domain, and how analysis can take place over the internet between kind of loosely connected people, each with different expert analysis to offer. There's also a great opportunity to have a look at these benchtop sequencing platforms at the time. This was around June 2011, and see how they performed. There was a lot of debate at the time about the relative merits of the instruments in terms of read quality, particularly a competition between the PGM and the MySeq, with both companies trading blows online and in various videos, you might remember. And so there's a lot of interest in comparing the quality scores from these instruments. This slide shows the predicted quality scores, which comes from the instrument's analysis software itself, and on the left we have the 454 Junior, in the middle the PGM, and on the right the MySeq. And we saw fairly different error profiles there, with the MySeq probably generating the highest quality data, with some reads getting up to near Q40, and then going down to around Q30 on average towards the end of a 150 base pair read, which was run in paired end mode. The PGM was more around the kind of Q20 mark, and the 454 Junior was somewhere in between, but with the caveat that it was generating much longer reads. Comparing quality scores in this way is not great, because it relies on the instrument manufacturers to have an agreed metric for how quality is measured. We had a near complete E. coli genome generated with high quality reference consensus bases, and so we used that to serve as a way of measuring the platform accuracy. We took a simple scoring method, which was to score SNPs and indels as an equivalent error, and then we used that information from the alignment to recalculate the error rates. And as a note, I think this is an important way of doing accuracy calculations and comparisons, and all of the source code from this paper is available if you want to do this on your own sets of data, but it does rely on having a high quality reference without a lot of SNPs in it. So here we saw that the 454 and the MySeq generally had quite good relationship between the measured and predicted quality scores, but the PGM showed actually the measured scores were quite significantly better than the predicted scores, but still lower than both the instruments. And the reason for that is that the ion PGM certainly at the time had a much higher rate of indels than the other two platforms, particularly associated with homopolymers, but also sometimes not associated with homopolymers. 454 Junior also had a reasonably high indel rate compared to the MySeq, which had barely any indels detected. It's not just us who have done these quality assessments, and luckily several other platform comparisons have been published recently. One by BGI, who also had a look at a similar kind of metric for the ion torrent and concluded similar indel rates, and a high Q30 average rates for the MySeq, and Mike Quayle, who found slightly higher Illumina error rates than we did, and error rates of about 1.78% for the ion torrent. So it's good to have multiple comparisons available there, and I encourage you to look at these papers as well. I put the DOIs up for you. At the time, platform-specific errors were quite noticeable in these data sets, and again, this is from Mike Quayle's paper. I draw your attention, there's quite a lot going on in this slide, so if you want to know the full details, look at the paper. But in panel B in the middle, At the top you have a pack bio data where you can see a high frequency of insertion events. In the middle is the ARN-torrent data showing insertion and deletions associated with relatively short homopolymeric tracts, and at the bottom you can see that the MySeq generally calls the homopolymeric tracts accurately. However, Mike did find that with very long homopolymeric tracts you did see sequence specific errors after the homopolymer, which you can see in the bottom left hand corner. He also noticed, as did we, that the ARN-torrent generated strand-specific errors, which is in the middle panel on the right, which is highlighted, where you see a single base indel associated with one strand but not the other. And this was put down to a DNA polymerase problem, and they've swapped the enzyme out, and this motif has apparently been fixed. Mike Quayle also looked at SNP calling. We kind of shied away from doing SNP calling because it's so parameter and alignment dependent, but he found, generally speaking, that he could call more SNPs with his PGM on the settings he used than with the MySeq, but with the caveat that he called a load more false positives with the ARN-torrent. That's a kind of interesting finding, and I think it would be worth looking at that in more detail and adjusting for different filtering parameters to see whether that holds true for all different combinations of false positives and false negatives. We didn't look at SNPs, we were more interested in de novo assemblies, and so we generated assemblies from the fragment data with various assemblers, and what we found was that in terms of contiguity or N50, the platforms behaved reasonably similarly. Certainly the MySeq in contigs and 454 were fairly comparable, although when you got about 20x coverage from 454 Junior by combining two runs, that increased read length combined with the read depth meant that the contiguity went up and the N50s went up accordingly. Notably, we found that a large number of genes in both the 454 Junior and the PGM were disrupted by frame shifts which were erroneous, associated with homopolymers or the strand-specific error that I mentioned. And in some cases, that accounted for up to 10% of the protein coding genes in the PGM assemblies. We didn't really see that problem at all with the MySeq. That's just kind of noticeable how different you can get assemblies from these platforms. We also looked at a battery of useful genes that would be relevant for a public health microbiologist, such as MLST sequences, antibiotic resistance genes, serotype antigens, etc., and just ranked the assemblies and the platforms in terms of the percentage of genes we found which were full length and completely accurate. And we were quite surprised by the diversity of results there, from nearly 100% of genes found down to about 50%. And the worst assembly here was one on the 454 Junior, where we had about less than 10x coverage and used Myra. Generally speaking, the MySeq performed the best with each assembler, and that's probably down to the indel errors as well. So that's something to bear in mind if you're doing de novo assembly for public health microbiology. Now, I mean, the criticism of both my paper and other papers is that we compared the performance last year, mid-2011, and things have moved on. That's completely fair. Things have moved on significantly since then, but I would caveat that by saying that both the MySeq and the PGM have moved on. So the MySeq is now doing 2x250 if you have the upgrade with expected throughput of greater than 7.5 gigs. The PGM have recently announced a 300 base pair kit, and the accuracy metrics do look significantly better than the results that we saw from the company data, but we want to try that out ourselves. And we know that 400 base pair kits are on the way for the PGM. The Proton is, a very exciting prospect in terms of getting much more throughput in a very short period of time, 2 to 4 hours. initially up to 10 gigs, but then potentially more than 60 gigs per run with the Proton 2 chip, which should be around in about 6 months from now. But we don't really know what the quality profile is going to be like that on that yet. So, you know, hopefully that's a whistle-top tour of Benchtop instruments. I'm really interested in the idea of extending this to a comparison that is continually updated, taking into account the rapid change of these instruments. And so myself and Lex Naderbrecht have come up with a project called SeqBench. And if that's something that interests you, we're looking for volunteers to help curate a database of sequence reads that can be used for these kind of comparisons, but also for various training purposes, running courses, or developing bioinformatics pipelines that are resilient and robust. So please get in touch if you're interested. I think I'm out of time now, so thank you very much for listening, assuming you haven't all just gone off and drank coffee or something. I've put a link to my Twitter feed and the name of my blog, and I'm not going to read through the acknowledgements, but thanks to all the people that contributed to this study. Okay, thank you very much. I think hopefully we're going to talk to you on Skype in a bit.